Welcome to the All-Star Success Codes podcast, where we take you inside the minds of champions to unlock the secrets to success straight from the mouths of those who have mastered their craft. I'm your host, Dave Scatchard. Join me as I take you on a journey to help you move the needle to your next level. Get ready to ignite your passion, unleash your potential, and uncover the blueprint for greatness. Welcome back to another episode of All-Star Success Codes. I'm Dave Scatchard, and today our interview is with Tyson Nash. And if you don't know Tyson, he was one of the most hated NHL players of all time. In his words, that's what his coach told him he would need to do to stick in the NHL, and he shares that a little later. But Tice was an incredible player, hilarious teammate and friend. We lived together in the minor leagues in Syracuse. Briefly when we both got cut from Vancouver. He's a year older than me, but he's one of my dear friends. We're still friends to this day. Him and his family are incredible people. And, you're going to love this interview. Tyson did play 374 NHL games, 329 games in the minors, then ended his career in Japan. And that's an interesting story that he shares near the end of the interview too. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Tice played the game the right way. He played hard, he played physical, and he grinded out a career when a lot of people counted him out because of his size or whatever. And he shares his success codes on how to override all of that when people don't believe in you, and what it takes to make it in hockey, but also in life and in business. This video was shot a few years ago, and we're repurposing it for the podcast because things didn't work out with the Netflix documentary that we were attempting to film. So in order for this to, play out where it sounds good and you can see both of us, I've had to re-record my portion from my office. So if it looks a little weird, that's just why. But trust me, the content is exactly the same. The words are word for word, except I'm just hooked up to a better microphone. And, I think you guys are going to love what he has to say. So buckle up, enjoy this interview with my friend, Tyson Nash. So first of all, tell us how you grew up, what your childhood was like, what was minor hockey like for you, and kind of how was things for little Tyson?
Well, my childhood, growing up, I grew up in a place called Sherwood Park, just outside Edmonton. It was probably 15 minutes, so it was kind of a little small town. Obviously the weather was cold. We had the Edmonton Oilers there, so that kind of made the winters go by fast. I was obviously a huge hockey fan, with the Oilers being there, Wayne Gretzky, Kevin Lowe, Tikkanen, all the Mark Messier. So, obviously hockey was my number one passion, and we had outdoor rinks on every corner. I spent a lot of time in the outdoor rinks, and then obviously on the ponds. You go out and wheel around, and that was my passion. That was my life. Hockey was everything, and that's what I wanted to do.
So how old were you when you started wheeling around, when you started skating, and when you started playing hockey?
I think I was about 5, I think, is when my dad first took me out on the outdoor rink. My brother obviously played, and I just kind of followed suit. I used an old pair of his skates, and we went out to Mills Haven, was our little neighborhood that they called it. They had an outdoor rink at the school there, so we'd go out, get suited up, and throw the skates out there and dangle around, and that's where it all happened.
So as a young player, what teams or what players did you look up to sort of, as role models or whatever when you're learning the game and trying to become a young player yourself?
Growing up in Edmonton, obviously the Oilers were there, and I always idolized. I was pretty spoiled as a kid. Let's face it. I mean, I watched those guys win a lot of Stanley Cups, and all the Hall of Famers on that team, and obviously Wayne Gretzky, which he was obviously my favorite player. Mark Messier was another guy I idolized. Kelly Buchberger, I love that guy. But the guy that stood out in my mind, just because I knew I was never going to be a Wayne Gretzky or a Mark Messier, because I knew I didn't have those skills. I mean, no one does. So I think the guy I always kind of looked to was a guy, Esa Tikkanen. He was a ton of fun to watch. I always had his jersey. He was always yapping at somebody and chirping, and he was a good player too, but that's a guy that I look to. I'm like, maybe this is a guy that I could mirror myself after and maybe one day become.
So as you started to go along, like when did you start to realize you had a chance to do something with it, whether it be going to junior or college or whatever? When did that start to change for you?
Well, for me, obviously, I just love playing the game, and I didn't really think about what was coming down the road and being drafted or being listed. I just knew I wanted to play hockey for as long as I could play hockey, and as you get better, and I was kind of mature at my age. When I was 13, I was a little bit bigger than everyone, so I had a little bit of an upper hand. And as we went to tournaments, I remember going to this tournament in Vernon and all of a sudden seeing all these scouts, and I'd never seen scouts before. And all of a sudden they're talking to you and talking to your parents, and you're like, holy, what's going on here? This is kind of exciting, and that's kind of where it all happened. I never got drafted. This might age me a little bit, but I was a listed player, so I remember at 13, the Kamloops Blazers, they took a big chance and they listed me, and that's kind of when I was a good player. I was scoring goals, I was doing all those things, but like I said, I was bigger than the other kids, and that's when I got listed. I think they took up 4 spots on their list to list a 13-year-old kid, so I didn't really know how important that was until years later, but I was obviously pretty thrilled, and that's kind of where I was like, wow, all right, Kamloops is my next goal. This is where I want to play. I went there in the summer. My dad showed me around. Bob Brown, the general manager, took me in and showed me around, and that's what I wanted to do.
So what would you do as a young guy to try to give yourself the best chance to make it? What were some of your habits, routines, or whatever?
Well, I think what kind of helped me to I guess turn myself into a hockey player at a young age was just my passion for it. It's all I thought about. It's what I dreamt about at night. I woke up in the morning. I went, shot pucks before school. After school, first thing I did, I go to the outdoor rink. It was what I loved to do. It's all I wanted to do, and I think it was easy for me. It's just because I was so passionate about it, and I worked so hard at it. And it wasn't because I wanted to be a hockey player to make money. It's just because I wanted to be a hockey player, and that's all I wanted to do. And so I think it was just it was a natural progression just to kind of gradually get better. The other kids, they'd go to movies, they'd go to to parties and birthday parties. I'd go downstairs in the basement and shoot pucks, or it's just what I wanted to do. And I know at times there was parents who were like, oh, you got to give them a break. You can't play hockey all year round. But honestly, it's all I wanted to do.
That's really good. When you were shooting pucks in the basement and when you were doing these things, like, what was going through your mind? Were you trying to pick spots? Were you trying to just drill the puck as hard as you can? Like, I know you're just shooting pucks, but I mean, what was your thought process while you were doing it? Were you visualizing a goalie in the net? Were you shooting it on a Tudor shooter? What were you doing when you were shooting those pucks?
Well, I think when I was downstairs in the basement shooting pucks and out with my friends, I mean, we had a real competitive neighborhood. They all played. My brother was 3 years older, so there was a healthy competition with him. He loved playing goalie. He always pretended he was Reggie Lemelin, so he had the Boston Bruins and the old brown pads, and so it was just fun to us. It was always a game, and it was right till the end. It was always a game to me, and it was always fun. But it was always that healthy competition. It's in you. You always wanted to beat the goaltender. You always wanted to work on your skills and get better. And ultimately though, it was my dad and my brother. We pushed each other. We always had fun. We always had a little game. Everything was a game, and it was either winning or losing. And none of us liked to lose. So that's what it came down to.
So as you progressed and started to get ready to move away from home, did you find yourself distancing yourself from your parents or your friends to kind of get ready, or did you get homesick at all? What was that like for you?
Well, I think when you move away at such a young age, I think being homesick is a big problem, and it was for me at 16. I mean, I was all excited when I got there. But that kind of wears off, especially as the grind of the Western Hockey League schedule is. I mean, you're on the bus all the time. But our group was such a good group of guys. We had a billet across the street from us, so we had 2 other guys living across. Jason Strudwick and Scott Laux were living across the street. Ryan Huska and a couple of the boys were just up the way, and so you had this group of guys that was kind of going through all the same things at the same time. We were all kind of young guys. Darcy Tucker, myself, and Ryan Huska, we were both 16-year-olds at the time, so we hung out and we confided in each other, and we cried at times, and but those long bus trips, you used them and you talked about a lot of things. And obviously, I was only 8 hours from home, so my parents came up quite often. My mom was there, my dad, and eventually my dad actually ended up getting transferred to Vancouver. So all hockey parents are very dedicated. My dad and mom, they drive up for every single game. So it was pretty remarkable. I didn't really think of it at the time, but looking back, I'm like, man, that's a long drive. That's a lot of miles and a lot of hours in a vehicle to watch your son play. And I really appreciate it, and it made it easier. After the game, whether you won or lost, we always used to win, so it was always a little happier. But he'd always go out there, and there was dad or mom there, so it was always kind of nice.
So you get listed. You're going to go play junior. You're preparing yourself to get ready to go. How do you mentally get ready to go for that first year of junior? I know, we dealt with your billet and homesickness and all that, but what were some other things that you did to prepare to go?
Well, I think, obviously junior hockey is the first big step in a career in hockey. And I didn't know where I was going to go after that, but I knew this was one of my goals was going to play junior hockey. And I remember, when I was in high school, I was in grade 10 and I was 15 at the time. And I was sitting in class, and my first experience was getting a phone call. They had phones in the classroom. And I remember getting called down to the office. I think it was December, and it was the Kamloops Blazers. They'd called me in class in high school, and they said they needed me to come up. They had injury problems. So I guess when you're 15, you're allowed to play 3 games. So I went up, and I remember getting into the car, and this guy, Vern Dubinsky, who's a good family friend of ours, he drove up, he picked me up, he had all my equipment in the back of his car, and we drove 5 hours from Sherwood Park to Regina, and I suited up that night for the Kamloops Blazers as a 15-year-old, and then I played the next night in Brandon, and I had a full cage on because I was 15, I couldn't wear the half visor, and it was a televised game, so it was a real big thrill for a 15-year-old kid. And that's again kind of the first stepping stone that I knew I wanted to make that team full-time next year as a 16-year-old. But and then that was a tough thing, moving away. I spent my whole childhood in Sherwood Park with all my friends, and I had a lot of great friends and family. I was kind of a mama's boy, and I really didn't want to leave, and so it was a lot of tears and, a lot of hugs with my buddies and, going away parties. And I'll never forget, my brother took me to Kamloops. We were at Peach Fest for a weekend, and then he drove me up there in his car and dropped me off and with my equipment and my stick, and we had a good cry there and a good hug, and he wished me good luck, and that was it. I was a 16-year-old kid kind of on my own, in Kamloops, dropped me off at the rink, and you live with a billet, and I moved in with this great lady, Mary Lane, and I had a couple great roommates. Daryl Sador, obviously, who had a great long NHL career, and Darcy Tucker was my other roommate at the time, and Zach Boyer. So that's kind of where it all started, and I was very, very blessed, I guess, to be on a team that was that good. As a 16-year-old, it was tough to make, but once you make a team that's that good, I mean, you have a huge opportunity. You're learning from the best players in junior hockey. You're watching these guys on a daily basis, what they do, how they train, what they eat, how prepared they get for their games, and what it takes. Some of these guys were already drafted. Daryl Sador was drafted to the LA Kings, I think 6th overall that year. Scott Niedermayer was another guy. So you watch these guys on a daily basis, and you learn from them, and hopefully you learn from them, because that's how you get better. And we went on to win 3 Memorial Cups, which was obviously huge, and a big reason why I was successful, why we got drafted. We had, I think, 12 guys drafted off my Memorial Cup team the one year. that was just remarkable. So, you know, you play on good teams and you get noticed, and it's not always about individual stats. It's about winning, and when you win, you get noticed by scouts, and that's how a lot of us got drafted.
So you win the Memorial Cups in Kamloops. That you're coming off a high there. You get drafted. You start going to these NHL training camps with the Vancouver Canucks, and I was there with one with you. What was that like, starting to meet your stars and your idols? I know you had a couple of favorite players that were actually on that Canuck team. Just take us through that and what that was like as a young guy starting to get closer to making it to the NHL.
I do. You know, obviously Esatikin was I was a big fan of his, and the first time I ever met him was just, it was bizarre, and that's kind of when it hit home, and it was in Vancouver, and you know, it was, I hadn't made it at the time, but it was a step in the right direction. I was kind of like, okay, I'm on the same ice as this guy. This is as good as it gets. You know, I almost had to pinch myself, but you can't get starstruck, and I think, you know, and it's almost impossible not to, you know. Mark Messier, another guy, you know, I was in Vancouver when he was there in training camps, and, you know, I mean, Mark Messier, he's like a god, this guy in the hockey world. So, you know, it's amazing. It's to be on the same ice and as guys you grew up watching and lifting the Stanley Cups, and here you are with them. It was, you know, I was like, all right, I'm getting close to my dream, but I knew I wasn't there yet. But it was pretty neat.
So I know when we both were the last cuts of the Canucks and we were going down, there was a couple of negative players that gave us a hard time. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Maybe how to use negativity as motivation, and sort of what your mindset is in dealing with the haters or the naysayers, and to just continue the belief in yourself even when it seems impossible.
Well, I think every player probably goes through it at some point in time, and I definitely went through it my whole life, my whole career, really. Once I turned pro, you know, I played with players who, you know, there's a lot of jealousies. There's a lot of, you know, when I was that last cut of that training camp, there's a lot of guys that I got cut earlier that were not happy with you know, me still being up there, and they thought they deserved to be there. So when I came down, they tried to bring you down to their level and to discourage you. And you know, I always believed in myself. I always knew that if I got an opportunity, that I could make something out of it. And you know, there was a couple players, and one in particular, that always told me, you know, you're never going to make it. You know, why bother? Go back to school. You know, get your education. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're too small. You know, you're not fast enough. You're definitely not skilled enough. You work hard. That's all you got going for you. And you know, it was hard for me to hear that. I didn't want to hear that, but again, I used it for motivation. Just like I used a lot of things in my life, it was fuel for the fire. You know, it motivated me because I truly believed in myself, that I knew if I got an opportunity, I could make the NHL, and it's all I wanted to do. I'm a hockey player. You know, I'm still a hockey player. It's what I love. It's all I know. And like I said earlier, that's what, you know, motivated me.
So we all know you go to the camps, you meet your idols, it's all going amazing, you're new to it, but I know the real story. And why don't you tell some of the listeners, you know, what are some of the hardest things? Probably what was the hardest thing that you had to go through as a pro, and tell us what was going through your mind at that time.
I think the biggest obstacle that I had to go through as a professional now was probably the point that I came from such a high in Kamloops. We had just won the Memorial Cup. Everything was going great. I had signed a contract. I thought I had a great training camp in Vancouver, and then I went to Syracuse as a 20-year-old. And we had an older team, and I was a rookie, and I wasn't getting a ton of ice time. And, you know, obviously coming from Kamloops, where I came from, I was getting all the ice time and everything was good. All of a sudden, you're a pigeon, you know, you're a rookie and you got to kind of pay your dues. And I wasn't really used to doing that again, because I had done it at 16 as a Blazer, and now at 20, I'm like, I'm a professional, you know, like I want to make the NHL. This is my next step. I don't want to play in the minors anymore. I want to go to the NHL. And I ended up getting hurt And I wasn't getting a ton of ice time because I wasn't a first round draft pick or a second pick. And it seemed like those guys were the guys that always got the ice time and every opportunity, the power play, and even if they were a rookie. So everything, it seemed that I was earning, I had to earn, and I had to earn my stripes. And I got hurt, I got a concussion, and I'll never forget my coach, Jack McElharty, coming in and saying, listen, we're going to send you to the East Coast League. And I was like, East Coast League? I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, do you know how far away, and I remember saying this to him, I'm like, do you know how far away that is from the NHL? I'm like, I've taken a step back now. So now I'm going in the reverse, and here I'm trying to get to the NHL, and now I'm going to the East Coast League. And I still believe in myself. I still know I can play and do more than I was doing at the American League level. So that to me was probably the hardest point in my career, having to take a step back and be like, holy, this is not it's not going the right way. Can I get through this? Am I ever going to make the NHL at this rate? Am I ever going to get back to the American Hockey League? Can I trust this guy that I'm even going to come back to the American League, or am I going to sit and rot in the East Coast League? So that to me was the toughest point in my career.